Try as one might, it's pretty hard to escape the gravitational field of news from PJM and ERCOT. They seem to be where tomorrow's power grid is being shaped these days. It's not that other markets don't matter, but the fault lines between data center driven demand and supply are most evident in these two markets. And the resulting regulatory responses have repercussions that will extend well beyond these two markets into the rest of North America. Plus, together, these two grid operators serve close to 30% of U.S. GDP, so that also is important. Today, we'll discuss the capacity auction results for PJM's 2028-29 delivery year. That's June 1st to May 31st. They were, in a word, consistent, which means there were no huge surprises. Once again, the price hit the $325 per megawatt day administratively approved cap that PJM put in front of FERC. And once again, the desired quantities of capacity fell short of the amount deemed necessary to meet the planned reserve margin of 20%. Let's get into the numbers and discuss what they mean and why they matter. First, the amount of capacity that cleared the auction was 149,181 megawatts. Second, that amount was 6,830 megawatts below what PJM calculates as necessary to meet its desired 20% reserve margin that can ensure grid reliability under worst-case conditions, an increased shortfall from last year's 6,516 megawatt shortage. More on that later. Third, the total level of new supply, including uprates of existing generation, where they increase the availability of existing assets to generate more power, well, that was just under 525 megawatts. Not very impressive in terms of the ability to attract newcomers. And fourth, and the number everybody pays attention to, the auction price once again cleared at the price cap, this time at $325 per megawatt day. That's the third auction in the row in which that cap has been hit. One last number to focus on. PJM ran a simulated auction absent the price collar. The floor sits at 175, the cap's at 325, and it found that in all markets except the Chicago area, the price would have cleared at close to $555 sans the cap. The Chicago area served by Commonwealth Edison would have been even further pummeled at almost $777 per megawatt day. Putting those numbers in perspective, from 2022 to 2025, before the massive data center forecast of loads entered the picture, prices ranged from $28.92 to $50 per megawatt day. And this new higher price, much higher price, pretty well explains why data loads are such a political hot potato and a lightning rod for opponents who fear price and rate increases resulting from new data load. They're right to do so. Per an email to Utility Dive from Joseph Bowring, the head of the Independent Market Monitor, who reviews PJM and reports to the FERC, in this latest auction, data center actual and forecasted load increased costs by $6.3 billion, with a total of $29.4 billion of increased costs over the past four capacity auctions resulting from forecasted and existing data center load. That's 46% of total capacity-related charges. But what this means is that all of the ratepayers are paying for this new data load that's coming into the grid without sufficient supply to meet it. So now we have the numbers. What does this portend for electric energy future? Well, let's start with the fact that not enough supply attendees showed up at the party. PJM sets its desired reserve margin, as we mentioned, at 20%. PJM arrives at its reserve margin number by simulating thousands of scenarios across seasons, looking at demand, the likelihood of unplanned generator outages, and also determining how much power it can expect to import from neighboring grids. And then they determine how much they think they're going to need. Well, in this auction, they fell 6,500 megawatts short, leaving them at just under a 15% reserve margin. So it makes it a little bit harder to keep the lights on in a worst-case situation. The caps, even as they offer some relief to energy consumers, well, they also create the problem because they don't provide enough of an incentive for new generation to join the party. Predictably, politicians who argued for the cap celebrate how much they save their constituents, and they generally don't focus on the shortfall. And just as predictably, energy economists and planners and regulators, including PJM, note that this type of market intervention with price collars will increase future supply shortfalls. In its summary document, PJM noted that, quote, a price cap, ... can reduce the amount of investment and therefore supply in the PJM region. Personally, I wasn't surprised that almost no new generation came to the 28-29 base residual auction with liquor and gifts for two reasons. First, there's a potentially more attractive reliability backstop procurement auction planned for September, in which new generators, can establish bilateral contracts with large loads, with delivery starting in the 2028-29 year, and you can get a far longer term from 2 to 15 years and a potentially higher price. The average price of that auction is capped at $555. Then there's the fact that PJM's recent white paper, written in May, which is worth reading, it essentially says the current approach to capacity is no longer working. It's not sufficient to ensure resource adequacy, and new approaches should be considered. The white paper also noted that the cost of developing a new gas-fired combined cycle reference plant is much higher than the estimated cost of new entry, which is close to that $555 per megawatt day price. And that is because of recent supply chain issues and a significant demand-supply imbalance with new turbines. GE, Mitsubishi, Siemens, they're essentially sold out through the end of the decade with orders well above existing factory production limits. Lazard, the financial analyst, they just released levelized cost of energy numbers in their 19th annual report, where they look at the all-in cost to generate a megawatt hour of electricity for different types of resources. And they indicated that a megawatt hour from a gas-fired combined cycle plant has increased in cost every year since 2019, with the 2025 to 2026 price increase soaring by 15% over the single year and up 50% over the past 5 years. So with the price, again, capped at $325 and these rising costs of generation, the shortfall should come as no surprise. We'll likely see another shortfall in the 2029-2030 auction that takes place in December. What did surprise me was the anemic amount of demand response and distributed energy resources that cleared the auction. PJM noted this was the first year that aggregated distributed energy resources, so-called DERs, under FERC's Order 2222 were eligible to participate. And you might remember 2222 basically directs the grid operators to treat aggregations of DERs over 100 kilowatts like any other wholesale asset. But none of them showed up to the auction. And at the same time, the total demand response number declined from 7,299 megawatts last year to 7,017 megawatts this year. I'm personally at a loss to explain this one, so perhaps somebody watching this vid can clue me in. I would have thought that these higher prices in recent years would have elicited a bumper crop of demand response in DERs rather than the meager harvest we've been seeing. The supply shortfalls weren't lost on FERC Chair Laura Sweat, who commented this was the second year with a shortfall, compounding the, quote, alarm bell, unquote. FERC has scheduled a technical conference this week on July 23rd to address these issues, but don't expect any magic bullets. These issues are challenging. They involve billions of dollars of winners and losers, and there's no easy fix here. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.